The issue was basically there was this claim that Hunter Biden's laptop, which contained all of this potentially compromising information, was just Russian disinformation. And a bunch of intelligence experts said that. And so Facebook, in response to that feedback, throttled. That is to say, it didn't totally suppress, but it limited the reach of those stories. Now we know that actually wasn't Russian disinformation, but it was actually true. But I think Mark Zuckerberg did something interesting, which is that he came out this week in this letter and just basically openly said, I regret a lot of the decisions that we made. And if we had the same facts that we do now, that we would have made different decisions and that we should have been more vocal in standing up to what were, he openly admitted, government demands that they censor certain information related to COVID-19, which, putting the politics of it to one side, I thought was just a fascinating move on a personal level to be able to do something that I don't think you see that much from leaders inside or outside of politics, which is to say that I had a big decision I had to make. It was an important decision and I got it wrong. And I would have done it differently. And I just thought that was kind of interesting. And it was different, I think, than certainly what a lot of people were expecting of him. I have a backstory on this, which I'll share in a second, but curious for your reactions to that, given a lot of our shared background and some of our own perspectives on free speech.
I think something we absolutely agree on is the importance of free speech and the importance of open debate. And indeed, something I think that's been a basis of our friendship is even when we disagree on issues, we can have a really fair-minded, open debate. And I think that's how you reach progress on these issues.
Yeah. When did you join Facebook? Were you at Harvard?
Yes, it was actually right before I started. It was opening up. It was like right before freshman year.
Yes, it was during my freshman year. Mark Zuckerberg was a sophomore. So here's a funny backstory. Is I think that a lot of audiences may misunderstand figures in the psychology of figures like Jack Dorsey or Mark Zuckerberg. So I was at, funny enough, UFC 300. It was the first UFC fight I'd been to. And Mark Zuckerberg's a big mixed martial arts fan. So we were both sitting, ringside, cage side right there that day. And we ended up striking up a conversation. We had never met before. He and Priscilla were actually very gracious. They were warm. They came over and introduced themselves to Apoorva and myself. We ended up chatting about a lot of things. It's a funny story I haven't told, but in light of what he did this week, which I thought was pretty admirable, it was an interesting interaction where he talked about, hey, shouldn't we actually have more of this, right? Aren't we a little bit too guarded? And isn't it great to just see the gladiatorial competitive spirits come on out? He's a big fan, right? I haven't historically been to MMA fights as much as Mark has. But I said, yeah, no, it's great. I mean, we had a great time that night. I said, I agree with you. But what do you think about applying that to the spirit of free exchange of ideas and free speech as well? And he visibly recoiled a little bit because I think part of him is, and I think the same is true for Jack Dorsey, for example, is a lot of that Silicon Valley 1.0 generation did view themselves, and even in some sense do view themselves as fair, as the guardians of free speech through fostering a free and open internet. And I do think he struggled with a lot of those decisions, and that was evident in my conversation with him as well. So this is about 3 or 4 months ago. But what I told him was, listen, I think it would actually go a long way, if you mean it, right? You don't have to mean it, but I think there's very little downside to you. If you came out and just said, I'm sorry, we screwed up. You're a human being, and we're all human beings. And I think that would go a long way. And he was visibly uncomfortable, but I think what he said at the time was, I'll think about it. I think it's a decent idea, and I'll think about it. And so when I opened the newspapers yesterday and saw him come out with exactly that quote, I'm sure other people have told him the same thing. I doubt it was just my conversation with him. Maybe it was, I don't know. But regardless, I think it's a good thing for the healing of a country where, regardless of the issue, free speech or not, where we're all able to say, you know what, I'll take a look at a different perspective, and if I've changed my mind, I'm going to be able to apologize for actions I might have taken in the past. I just thought that was a pretty beautiful thing this week.